Okay, hi everybody. This is Elliot Fishman, and welcome to our Facebook Live. Today is the 17th of September, and hope everybody's doing well. Those of you on the East Coast are experiencing some fall weather, which is kind of cool because it is September. And we've been the last few days, the weather in the morning, like when you go to work at 6:30, has been about 42 or 44, which is about 20 or 30 degrees less than it was a week ago. So that part's kind of cool. It does warm up to the 70s, so it's really spectacular weather. It's not going to be swimming weather, and even the Zenrites next door have closed their pool, so it's fall, and we wish all our friends. I understand things are getting a little bit better on the West Coast. We were speaking to some people yesterday that there was the first day where the air index was in the safe category, that a little bit of moisture and a little bit of the winds is making things a little bit better, making it a bit easier perhaps for the firefighters to do their job. So I think that becomes important. We wish everybody well there. The pictures, the loss of lives, the loss of property, just the whole catastrophe from Washington to California is just amazing. And I don't know what's going to be done about it. It's whether we need to have a better strategy of cleaning out forests early, whatever it needs to be done. I think people are going to have to look hard at what needs to be done. Home, you can see some of my pictures. There's some pictures of me as a little kid up there somewhere, and just a bunch of toys. If I showed you everything, you wouldn't believe half the stuff we got. And there's a bunch of books back there, which I don't probably read, and all my CDs and everything else. I have all the CDs. I can't throw them away, but they're all on my computer. But it's the principle of throwing anything away that makes it very difficult. But hope everybody's doing well. Let me see what's behind me here. Some other good stuff. There's a great book out now by Sandy Greenberg, and it has a lot to do with Art Garfunkel. And here's the thing Sandy sent me last year or 2 years ago, and Art Garfunkel autographed his album, and got to see him. So that was pretty cool. It's a great book to read. And speaking about great things to read and great people to speak to, those of you who are at Hopkins or affiliated with us had the privilege last night of listening to us speak with Patrick Collison. Patrick Collison is the CEO and co-founder of Stripe. It's a company that does transactions on the web. Most of you never heard of the company. It's worth 40 or 50 billion dollars. He built it up over 10 years from scratch based on an idea him and his brother had. Terrifically nice people, and it's something that's really growing. And so we spoke to him uh, about literally from his upbringing in Ireland to coming to the US to going and dropping out of MIT, the ability to come up with new ideas. But also, he's written a lot of different things and he's been interviewed many places. And his interest, and I'm trying to find it if I can show it to you perhaps, maybe I can't see it at the moment, is he wrote two articles in the Atlantic magazine about science. And it's interesting. So one of his thoughts was that are we getting our bang for our buck? So he made the point, for example, that there's 100 times more scientists and 100 times more money spent on science and 100 times more articles, but discovery seems to be going slower. Now, one can argue there's reasons for that. One reason is people are stupider. Okay, that's not a good right answer. Another reason is perhaps all the easy stuff was discovered. In the 1920s, physics discoveries were like this. Now it's almost everything discovered that can be discovered has been discovered. Now, I don't quite believe that, but I do believe surely the low hanging fruit has been discovered. I mean, you know, you can come up with the idea of washing your hands or wearing a mask at surgery. That was a discovery in the 1900s. Now, if you didn't wash your hands or didn't put on a mask, people would fire you. So things change over time. But he did very clearly make the point that perhaps we're not doing science correctly. He spoke about how, for example, a lot of people spend a lot of effort getting grants, but the grants are often based on things you've done already. And when you go for a new grant, you have the old stuff plus a little bit more. But if you have novel concepts, you might not get funded. And if you have something that's very risky, it might not get funded. And so you can't afford not to get funded. So you take small steps. Also, in a different interview, I heard him speak about how the Howard Hughes Foundation. There, you pick a smart person, you say, I'm giving you 7 years of money, come up with something great, rather than making them write out specifically what they're going to do every week for the next 7 years. But it's also 7 years, it's not 3 years. 7 years is a long time. You could think deep, you could make mistakes, you could redo, reinvent, rethink. 3 years, all of a sudden, by the second year, you're redoing your grant and you haven't done a whole lot of work, but you're reapplying. So, the process of how we do things, he questioned. He also spoke a little bit about how this, that maybe science needs to be cultivated more. He made the point very aptly. So there's certain areas in the world, uh, Eastern Europe in the 20s and teens were incredible in discovery, both in all across science, physics, chemistry, medicine, but they haven't done much since. The U.S. didn't do much. Now we do more. He also made the point that when you look at Nobel Prizes now are often given out for things that were done 30 or 40 years ago. That's great, but it should be, why isn't there anything that was discovered 5 years ago or 8 years ago, for the most part, getting these Nobel Prizes? So it's something I think that we needed to think about. He also spoke about, and you can look online, he puts a series of books out that he recommends people reading. They range, I mentioned yesterday, from the book by Seneca, which is like 3rd BC on theory of life, to a book his mother wrote on cerebral palsy just recently, to a book Charles Munger, who's the co-leader at with Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway. So a range of things. He also made the point that when you learn something, you can't learn it superficially. You got to learn it deep, and so the importance of depth. He also spoke about the importance of groups of people, that you need to have peers that you're working with and learning from, that you can learn a lot yourself and you could do very well yourself, but if you have a strong group of peers, you'll even do better. Now, we always speak about mentoring, which usually is someone's above you talking, speaking to you, but also peers. There are ways of thinking of ideas, of sharing concepts. Often you look at academics and you'll notice a whole bunch of good people came from a certain institution. Think about UCSF under the Alex Margulis days. I mean, Dr. Margulis was the king, but there were so many good people because the other people kind of fed each other, whether it was the Brooke Jeffries or the Mike Federleys, Reed Dunnicks of the world, and you go on in body and neuro. So many people, Gary Glazer, so many people came from that, I won't say factory, but that factory, who excelled both in academics, excelled as being nice people, and excelled and became chairman, and were really good chairmen. So that becomes very important. So the groups, who are your groups? It's something, I think my grandmother, probably your grandmother, also told you that if you hung around with a bunch of people who really weren't that desirable, or just, that was her opinion, people who they weren't your class, that you'd become like them, that you wouldn't go anywhere, you wouldn't move anywhere. But it's true in some sense. Who your peers are, I've noticed that people who have really good peer groups, people who work together and think together, do well together. Okay? That's a very common thing. And people who are nice, that rubs off on other people. If someone helps you, you're more apt to help someone else. So it's a lot of that, and he spoke about that very, very nicely. Part of it was his science of progress, that groups of people in specific places over time have really excelled. It's not just some randomness where things are going on in 7 different continents. Things are, but it's really certain areas where you say, my God, what was in the water there that people were so smart and did so well? That's kind of a good way of thinking about it. One of the things about science, of course, is breakthrough ideas. You need to have breakthrough ideas. Everything that's, coming up with a better X-ray machine is not the same thing as inventing CT. So unless you're thinking different and you're thinking about bigger pictures and bigger opportunities, you're often going to perhaps undercut what you could possibly do, because if you're just looking for someone said, Henry Ford said, and he talked about the customers and asking customers what they wanted. He made the point in 1890 or something about then that if you asked customers what they wanted at that point, this was pre-cars, they would have said a faster horse. No one asked for a car which didn't exist. So it's up to you to come up with that breakthrough that no one else thought about. And our speaker yesterday made the point. Him and his brother had this idea, but then they said, this is such an easy idea and it's so simple, someone else must have thought of it already. And let's not waste our time. Then they looked and looked and looked and nobody had thought of it. Nobody had done it. So they did it. And his point is, if you have a good idea, don't throw it away so quickly. Look into it. See really. It may seem simple to you because everything's always simple, right? It's like you're learning math, you're learning science, you're learning history. Everything's impossible till you learn it. Once you learn it, it's kind of simple. But if you're thinking of something, make sure you continually think about what you could do with that information. And I think that becomes very, very important. I wrote down some other questions I asked him. I asked him perhaps about making decisions. How do you hire people? And he was very good about that you need to hire people who are very talented, but you need to hire people who are very dedicated, who are going to work hard. I read an article he wrote where he mentioned that Jeff Bezos, when he was first advertising for Amazon, he basically said, here's what I'm looking for. I got a job that takes 3 years. If you can do the job in a year, I want to hire you. I don't want people who could do it in 3 years. I can find plenty of those people. I want people who can do the impossible. And you think about that for a second, you could say, what an ass. What chutzpah. But that wasn't the point. The point was he wanted people who were not limited by boundaries. He wanted people who were not thinking, this is all I can do. He wanted people who had a challenge and could be challenged and could excel. He also made the point that one of the things you want to ask people, and when you look at people and you're trying to hire them, is this someone I can learn from? Is this someone who, if them and I disagree, they may be right and I might listen to them? Is this somebody you would want to work for? If you interview someone and you say, boy, this person's a jerk, I would hate to work with them, don't hire them. We all know people like that. Just say, oh my God, thank God I don't have to report to them. Thank God I don't have to work with them. Well, you don't want to hire a person like that. You want to hire people you say, damn, I really like that person. And I would love to work with them, whether they work for me or I work for them. Just being in their space would be a great thing to do. Now, it also brings up many of the points that I think are getting a little bit buried in this whole COVID-19 stay at home. I think everybody's a little bit down. I have to admit, people aren't traveling, they're not seeing relatives. We're busy now, but it's kind of a little bit monotonous. You're doing everything same day to day. There's no clear thing between weekend and weekdays. Some people, their kids are back at school, but most people, the kids are still home. That's stressful. People just aren't in their usual cycle. And human beings are always like cycles. You need to change your cycle every once in a while or it gets boring, but you want to be able to change it the way you want. So instead of walking left to right, you walk right to left. Okay, that's a change. Not much of a change. But right now, you're following the rules. You're home. You're not going to restaurants. You're having food delivered. You're cooking the same food over and over again. You're ordering in the same food over and over again. Your scenery is the same. If you're home, you're looking at your room. You're looking at the street you walk around in a circle on. You're not traveling elsewhere. If you're at work, I think one of the most fun things I have, today I'm home, but 90% of the time I'm at work. For a lot of stuff, I don't really need to be at work. But the fact is, it's much more pleasant being there because it's different. It's different walls, it's different oxygen. I could do things differently. You could really be more engaged. So it's a tough thing being home. I know that some of our researchers are home. They're getting a lot of the work done, but it's not that same thing. And it's this problem with boredom, because so much of what we do is talking to other people, engaging with other people. Like my speaker last night, he was fantastic. We did it on Zoom. We spoke for a minute before, and that was it. The meeting was over. But you could imagine if he was there, we would have sat next to each other. We would have met during the day a few times. We would have met other people. We would have chit-chatted. We would have gone to dinner after. You would have had that personal warmth. Here he came on, we spoke, he left. Being on Zoom, you don't have that warmth, no matter how hard you try. You don't have that feel. You don't have that personal touch. And that personal touch is something that we all need, whether it's in life, whether it's socially, whether it's professionally. The ability to talk about nothing or to talk about a good idea. I was reading a thing from Eric Schmidt about Google. The reason Google gave free food in the beginning was they wanted it to feel like you're home. You were home when you worked at Google. At home, you don't pay for food. Your mom's not asking, give me $3 for dinner or $30 for dinner or whatever you want to put it. No one's asking you for money. They want people to feel like they're home and just chat like they're home. They want people to think of ideas and do things differently because they just run into people. If I talk to you, you may ask me, what am I doing? I may ask you what you're doing. And then you might say, that seems really interesting. I wonder if you ever thought about this, or, I'm doing this. Maybe the two of us together can do something. You can talk about progress. You can talk about the weather. You can talk about how you're going to fix the weather. You can talk about many, many things. But when you do things like Zoom, and all of us are doing so many Zoom calls, the meeting starts, the meeting is over. You go through the meeting. We do multidisciplinary pancreatic conference. It's very efficient. We see all the images, we talk. But the warmth, just even the discussion about research projects is just not there because you're looking at a screen. I'm scrolling through, showing everyone the images, but it's not the same as sitting around a table, getting there a few minutes early, staying a few minutes late, all of the things that we've always done. Now, and I think that going full circle back to Patrick, I think his point about, thinking about how we do things, thinking about how we do things without boundaries, thinking about how we can do things better, how we can do things different and hopefully differently better, are all things that are suffering just a touch now. So I think it's important as we go through this next year. Again, I'm all for the vaccines working from Pfizer or AstraZeneca, and then people getting vaccines, and then us coming back out of where we are. But I'm practical. I still don't see us going to a meeting till 2022 sometime. So another year on top of the 6 months plus is going to be somewhat difficult. You can see how the world changes. For those of you who are Jewish, the Jewish holidays begin Friday night, Rosh Hashanah, then the following week is Yom Kippur. You're going to be doing it from home. Yes, a few people can go to synagogue, but nobody wants to go. The service, instead of being 5 hours, will be an hour. Normally we say, great, I like an hour, but everything's an hour. You got to be careful. You're sitting 26 feet from this person and that person. You don't go to the bathroom, and it's an hour long instead of 5 or 6 hours long. And you begin to say, well, is it worth going in for an hour? And most people decided the answer was no. So they'll try to get some of the stuff from home or from different TV channels to learn the stuff. I mean, who ever thought that the Jewish holidays, sometimes as a kid you complain you had to go all the time, it was too long, but whoever would think there's no complaining? It doesn't exist. We're not going to synagogue. What kind of crazy thing is that? And that is COVID-19. And I think it wears on everybody. It wears on everybody differently, whether you're single or married, whether you have kids living at home or you don't have kids living at home, whether your kids have moved back home. I think all of those things really do impact everybody. Now, let me see. Let me look at some questions. I see you, Scott. Collaboration. Where is it here? Collaboration and competition are both realities we all must acknowledge and embrace in all of our endeavors, and that's 100% true. And as I mentioned, it's harder to do that collaboration now. We are trying. Do not get me wrong. We've published more articles, and I was looking at emergency radiology, speaking to the editor there, and speaking to the editor of Journal of Digital Imaging, who sent us a note that they've had twice as many submissions as they had before. So people are home, people are sending stuff in, but it's just not exactly the same. So anyway, if no one has any other questions, yeah, Israel starts the second COVID lockdown this Friday for 3 weeks because the numbers in Israel, in part because of the religious Jews there and because of some of the Arab population who doesn't follow the rules well, they're going to have a 3-week lockdown. You can't be more than 250 meters from your house. So we're talking about you can walk to your front door, but that's about it. That's going to be for 3 weeks across the main Jewish holidays. So it's really going to be difficult. I read this morning Europe, whether it's Germany or Italy, France, Spain, are all having resurgence of COVID. It's something we worry about in the States. We've managed to keep the numbers down, and we need to be very vigilant to keep those numbers down, particularly as the flu comes along, as we're in flu season and the weather gets colder, where people are more apt to congregate inside. So, with that, I don't want to depress anyone, but I want to enthuse people that you just got to be able to think differently, have opportunity. Use Zoom, talk to people, get out there talking to people. Don't get out there and sit in crowds, but it's a great time to be able to think. And I will post some of the articles that Patrick Collison has written, and I think it's worthwhile reading them. So with that, I thank everybody for their attention, and hope you have a great day, and see you next time.